Hi, I'm Kara Murphy, and this is Money with Murphy. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve. The economist Thomas Sowell once said, "There are no solutions, only trade-offs." Economic trade-offs will be top of mind for Federal Reserve officials at this week's Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, an annual retreat of economists and policymakers from around the world set against the backdrop of the Grand Tetons. Fed officials are used to trade-offs as they're tasked with managing the dual mandates of maximum employment, meaning as many people working as possible, and price stability, or limited inflation. The tools that the Fed has to manage those mandates often help one but hurt the other. For instance, higher interest rates can help slow inflation but often cause unemployment to rise. So the Fed's job is really not about getting it perfect, but simply balancing those trade-offs. At economic extremes, choosing which mandate to focus on can be relatively straightforward. So during the early days of COVID, unemployment skyrocketed while inflation was stable. So to get their dual mandates back in balance, the answer was clear: cut interest rates and fast to bring jobs back into balance with inflation. Just 2 years later, the situation had changed dramatically. At that time, inflation was at rates not seen in decades, with employment at rock bottom levels. Employers were struggling to find enough workers. Then, too, the answer was relatively clear. Just this time, it was to raise interest rates. And so the Fed funds rate went from 0 to over 5%, driving headline consumer price inflation down from nearly 9% to just 3%. Today, the Fed's trade-offs are a little more nuanced. While unemployment is still low, it has increased. And inflation has declined, though not quite to the Fed's goal. And to complicate things further, interest rates take a while to impact the economy. So officials must answer what's the right level of interest rate to get employment and inflation into equilibrium, and, just as importantly, to keep them there. If the Fed does nothing, unemployment may rise to an uncomfortable level. And if the FOMC cuts interest rates too soon, inflation may rise. That challenge will be hanging over Jackson Hole later this week. Investors will be listening carefully for hints as to when the Fed will begin to cut interest rates and by how much. Markets are currently betting that the Fed will make its first cut at the next meeting in September and will end the year with the Fed funds rate a full percentage point lower than it is today. Whatever the Fed decision, it will represent a major change in monetary policy as officials shift from hiking rates to cutting them for the first time in 4 years. Policy shifts often mean near-term volatility in the market as investors adjust. That said, these shifts are also a healthy part of the economic cycle as policymakers and investors effectively manage trade-offs. So until next time, invest wisely and live richly.